Hi everyone. So welcome to the one before the last session or the last paper session called Designing Experiences, Experience Design. So we have 3 talks today. Each talk will be 20 minutes long, including the Q&A. And then at the end of the talks at 3:30 p.m., we will move into the Mozilla Hubs to have a more open discussion. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the first speaker who will present about designing blended experiences. It will be presented by Brian O'Keefe from Farmingdale State College. So if you have any questions, please post it in the Q&A box that you can see at the below of your screen. Okay, so Brian, you can go ahead and start presenting. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Roshan, very much. All right, everyone see my screen, yeah? Great, so yeah, thank you. My name is Brian O'Keefe. I'm an assistant professor of interaction design at SUNY Farmingdale State College. And our presentation today is designing blended experiences, laugh traders as a design fiction evaluation. A little bit about what we're going to see today is introduce myself for a little bit. I'm going to talk about what are blended experiences. I'm going to talk about a workshop that's been ongoing for a number of years called the Blended Interactions Workshop. And then I'll be introducing Laugh Traders, a design fiction. And then shortly after, I'll be showing the evaluation that we had therein. And I'll summarize about what we'll be doing next as we look forward. So essentially what we're all doing here, and instead of students being consumers of mixed reality educational services, our students have really become the inventors of mixed reality experiences. And that goes throughout the entire work we're doing at SUNY Farmingdale State College. So this work is a part of a $400,000 regional economic development grant. And we're looking at 3 things. We're looking at the impact of learning of mixed reality, how faculty will be trained in mixed reality. But this particular presentation is about number 3, and how will mixed reality create bridges for international research collaborations. And this here is the team. We have my colleague at Farmingdale, Mike Mastermaker, is a part of this. Tom Flint and David Banyan, editor at Mejia University, and Miriam Sturdy from Lancaster University, and Andrea Chirico at Universidad Rome de La Spianza. We all are collaborating in different ways, contributing in different ways to put together what you're about to see. So what are blended spaces, excuse me. Looking back at the literature, contrary to Microsoft's belief, mixed reality goes back into 1994, where Milgram and Kishno looked at the mixed reality spectrum, everything from tangible user interfaces to immersive VR, and everything else in between. So what we're doing here is really underneath this umbrella of the mixed reality spectrum. Since 1994, Hiroshi Ishii of the MIT Tangible Media Group has been looking at how digital information has been taking physical form. And they've been looking at this for a number of years. A great example of this, I don't have time to play it all, but Gatorade commercial of showing how water droplets precisely timed through strobe lighting and photography, how these water droplets takes physical form. Check out the video, everybody. It's really cool. It's pretty inspirational. Fortunately, we don't have all that time. What we were focusing on designing with blends, my former mentor, David Banyan, has given us this research, and we're moving on forward. Unfortunately, we lost David about 2 years ago to lung cancer, so this presentation is one of 3 final research papers that he has directly contributed to, so we're quite honored to have him as a mentor. In 2006, he had a book called Designing with Blends. That's the foundation of our work. And what David says is blended spaces are where physical and digital spaces are carefully co-designed. And what happens is it's not about the mobile UI or the VR space. It's about the physical place as being the product as a result of whatever technology might be present. Blended spaces are more than just mixed realities. They have their own properties, their own coherences. Blended theory comes from linguistic research. It goes way back earlier than this, but one idea is frenemy, right? You might not have seen this word before, frenemy, friend, enemy. And of course, a great example of that is Professor X and Magneto, as these two domain spaces come together. This work also extends into presence theory in 1997. You can find examples earlier in that. But presence is the sense of being in a place or being there, the presence where the technology recedes into the background and you're just engaged in that particular activity. Clearly, as designers, we need to be very careful if what we're presenting disrupts that experiences. We've broken the illusion of non-mediation. A great example of this might be if you're wearing a VR headset, you're in this really cool space, and then your eyeball starts steaming up in the glass, breaks the experience. Great, fine. But how do you design for these blended experiences? Well, I was a visiting assistant professor at RIT for a while. This was my first grant that I was awarded. It was a $106,000 grant to look at augmented reality for Genesee Village Country Museum in Rochester, New York. And I put together a great group of master's students at RIT across many different disciplines. And Susan Lakin and I came together and said, well, what can we do at Genesee Village Country Museum through AR experiences? We applied the blended spaces framework and directly gave it to 5th grade students to design their own augmented reality experience and evaluate those experiences with other 5th grade classes. So it was great. For example, here's the generic space at Genesee Village Country Museum, which is this living history museum. And here's these locations, so what? But what the students did is they tied all these locations together to create a compelling story. And then what the 5th graders had to do was then geolocate their own augmented reality characters to these physical places. Great stuff, great outcomes, had a good time. Students, our RIT students presented at Kai in Peiris. It was a blast. Great. Brian, so what have you done lately? That was a little while ago. Even though my time at RIT was completed, I was able to take the blended interactions workshop onward and upward. And this presentation is about the 2019 blended interaction workshop. Our backdrop was the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And we looked at the impact of mixed reality in these spaces. If you don't know, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival is a massive event. Literally, they get 500,000 visitors, actors, thespians, etc., to descend on this place. Our students, Napier students and Farmingdale students, just went around town and interviewed, surveyed, understood the space that we were all in through Human-Centered Design 101. There's no magic here. And what we uncovered is that businesses rely on ticket sales that are paper-based. It's kind of a waste, as you can see, a lot of waste here. Festival reviews and shows have these arbitrary stars associated with it, and you don't really know, well, why are they there? And performers lack meaningful feedback on their performances. So we added the blended spaces framework to this space, and we use speculative design to capture our ideas through what we call design fictions. And design fictions is a great tool to understand how we push the boundaries of future prototypes and scenarios. So at the end of the day, we had 7 design fictions as a result of this. We chose 3 to further iterate upon. What we're going to be focusing on the left-hand side, circled in orange, or outlined in orange, excuse me, called Laugh Traders. Here's Laugh Trader here. So we introduce our 3 personas. We have Mike the skeptic, Stuart the optimist, Dan the comedian. And the backdrop is Mike and Stuart are visitors of the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, a world-renowned performing arts festival. Dan is a comedian, and visitors and performing artists from all over the world participate. So essentially, Stuart looks around and notices this sign that says a live comedy act, and Mike is skeptical, like, okay, sure, these people are reviewing it. Who are these people reviewing it? He doesn't really know. But Stuart is very excited and pulls reluctant Mike along to go ahead and buy these tickets. And at this point, he's introduced with this new system at the Wint ticket office that essentially replaces paper ticketing. And you should download this app called Laugh Traders. Mike is still not convinced. However, he is able to get into the venue without a paper ticket, and they're about to enjoy the show. So during the show, the technology is in the background. It's a wearable device that's collecting biodata about during the 45-minute act. And what happens is when they leave the show, the biodata is collected in a novel way where it tells you how you might have reflected, or how your bio data reflected into the act. So in this case, Mike found it hilarious. Like, it was really, you didn't expect how much you would enjoy the show, where even Stuart here, he was like, didn't live up to his expectations, essentially. So of course, we want to be diligent innovators, but we also want to be diligent thinking about the business and of course how this would make revenue. Of course, as you would leave the show, you can have opportunities where you're sending discounted opportunities for next year's show tickets and say, well, if you like this show, like a Netflix example, you saw this, now you watch that, and here at the same time you get 25% off and you go on your way. But more importantly, for Dan the comedian, he's able to reflect, to look back and see what the audience thought through their own biodata. So they can see his score, see what highs and lows he had during the event, right? And he can then, of course, go back into the shop and, you know, tweak his act, and then, of course, present better the next time he's on stage. And that wraps up the design fiction. Now, of course, that's all well and good, but of course, as you know, as researchers, we gotta measure stuff. And on the right is my attempt to make a spreadsheet look good, so bear with me. What our method here was a statistical method called factor analysis. We ran our design fictions against 20 undergraduate students. We used Likert scales, semantic differentials, and short answers to try to figure out what are these factors that we're trying to get out of it. And we measured this study through the storyboard's relevance, its transparency, like how transparent is the technology, and what's the overall feasibility of this product, excuse me. And the great news, our measures has a 95% accuracy rate, excuse me, and so we felt pretty confident about our numbers. Remember, there are other scenarios that we compared this to. We're focusing on laugh traders, and laugh traders, the orange bit in the middle there. And we asked the question, the physical things in the storyboard are essential, referring to the paper tickets. And they somewhat agree, the feedback is they somewhat agree, the participants. And we reflect on this idea thinking, well, we moved away from paper tickets and therefore the physical things are not as important as they would have been. The factor of transparency was very strong. The storyboard clearly identifies how people interact with one another. And one of our primary principles here was to make sure people weren't, face planting into their own technology, not looking at each other, to, sucked into their own mobile devices. And we wanted to make sure people were interacting with each other, not the technology itself, which is why we use biodata. And also we looked at, does the storyboard's relationship between people, are they critical? And this supports our notion that digital spaces should not interfere or distract from the physical place. That's why during the show, technology is completely in the background. So in short, what we did was, upon reflection, we looked at how blended spaces explore the audience and the emotional feedback through the novel detection of biodata. And what we address is skepticism that some visitors might have by hyped up comic reviews. And we included a novel approach to think about the democracy of people gathering all their data, biodata, to say, well, this one by the people is actually the best show versus one that's just, hyped up. And of course, thinking about sustainability, we're pulling away from wasteful print-based advertisements. So work in progress. Since then, we are still having these annual blended interactions workshops. We just wrapped up a session looking at the role of mixed reality in the social academic COVID-19 undergraduate experience. Very interesting project there. We ran a course this semester devoted to designing blended experiences. It's a senior level undergraduate course. And my colleagues and I in the UK and EU are creating Adobe Creative Suite pedagogical tools that support the process of building blended experiences without going through the theoretical training, because we want to focus on the product, not just the theory. So thank you very much. I'd like to take any questions if you have them.
Okay, so if you have any questions, once again, please put into the Q&A box so that we can read out and answer your questions. Yeah, thank you, Brian, for that really awesome presentation. I really like the idea of the blended experiences as well. And yeah, I think until we wait for some questions, I also have one question probably about these kinds of biodata being collected, right? So it could be interesting to see how much control the users also would prefer to have this automatically collected versus, being able to control what's being collected, these sorts of things. What is your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, clearly you would run into some ethical issues if this came into fruition, of course, and that's one of the values of the blended spaces of, the design fictions approach, to look at possible futures and see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, definitely. I think like if you watched a couple of the episodes of Black Mirror, like these things are also kind of being imagined as a, but I think like there's always this kind of excitement around these kinds of technologies as well, so that we can literally sort of blend into like these kinds of experiences and realities. Okay, so I think we can maybe move on to the next talk in this case. Thank you very much, Brian. So as for the next talk, we'll be the next talk will be presenting SWIM, disseminating process work in VR using hubs. It will be presented by Jaye Blanchard and Mark Reisch from the Rochester Institute of Technology. So please take it away, Mary and Mark.
Thank you, Roshan. And Mark is going to be running this presentation. Okay, thank you, Mark. So, Mark, can you see it? I can't see it there yet. That's okay. I can start speaking.
Take your time. I think we are ahead of the schedule.
Okay. Well, I'll just start speaking as we figure out where the presentation is.
Oh my God. All right, here we go. Sorry about that. My computer has a little fit. There we go. We should be good now.
Okay. I'm sure it will come up soon. There we go. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm going to be introducing this presentation, but I think it's important for me to be the one doing the introduction, because up until I started on this journey of making a VR film, this was not my language, this was not my world. And so it's been very interesting for me as a filmmaker to participate in it. And I think that's part of what we're speaking to today in terms of how information can be disseminated using hubs, as opposed to the different ways that we would traditionally present information. And so this is a presentation on a project that I worked on with Mark Reisch. Mark Reisch was the VR director, and Vicky Mejia as the sound designer. But I was the animator and the director of the film. So Mark can go to the next slide. So when I started this film, again, I'm a traditional 2D animator, and we're talking about frame of mind here because I was intending to make a 2D film as a 2D animator, and I had a set process in mind. And when I decided to expand upon the idea of the film, which was about the interior mind of a young girl, I thought that VR would be a great platform for it. So my 2D, and Mark, you can click, 2D animation became a 2D, 3D hybrid virtual reality film. And immediately I had to figure out what the process for that was going to be. And I had no language for how that was going to play out. And so Mark and I, right from the beginning, needed to start this ideation process in a virtual space. So we took a 2D storyboarded project and we entered a 3-dimensional space. So this is one of my really, really initial mock-ups, which was drawn in Oculus Quill. And again, I'm a 2D animator drawing 3-dimensionally. And I was trying to show Mark, we had had many discussions about what this world looked like. And I think until I could literally draw it and walk him through it, I'm not sure that Mark understood anything that I was talking about. And I think what's amazing about this first step in our process was that we were quite quickly, once it was made clear that there was sort of a misunderstanding about, or not a misunderstanding, but an inability for me to really describe what was going on in my mind, the 3D space became such an easy way to explain the structure that I was looking for. So I'm hoping later some of you will be able to go into our actual Hubs room and see the presentation, but I'm not going to talk about the process of the film here because we do not have enough time. But if you want to join us after this presentation, you can join us. But I'm going to now pass it off to Mark, because when we planned it, we had a whole plan, and then yes, this is what goes on. So take it from here, Mark.
Boom. Yep. So as many people on here have talked about, we made a plan. We were finishing up in January and things were just starting to wrap up. And then COVID, of course, became the thing. And so February and March events started getting canceled. And one of the big ones for me personally was E3 is a gaming conference and held every year, and it's huge. And when that was canceled, that canceled on March 11th. That was kind of like the canary in the coal mine for us. I thought, okay, well, we're going to be sending our stuff out. How are we going to be able to show this VR work when the main transmission for the disease is, passing stuff back and forth in close contact? And that's, some things that VR in a conference type setting can really be. So luckily enough, around that same time, the IEEE conference was about to happen. And I don't know how this group put together a virtual conference so quickly. It was, I think they were set to go completely in person, and then of course everything started canceling, and so they were able to convert over online very quickly. And in that online, the things that they used were streaming webinars and Discord, kind of like what we're doing today. And then they were also using hubs that you could go in and watch some of the streaming videos. So you could have kind of like a more group interactive kind of watching experience if you wanted to go that way. And then the hubs were also used as a meet and greet kind of place. The conference ended up, they converted everything so that it was 100% free. So you could attend the conference since you weren't going in person, that it was 100% free. They offered the attendees, if you wanted to present or put together a birds of a feather hub, meaning that if you had a particular subject that you wanted to talk about, you could create your own hubs room and then promote it within the IEEE conference, and then you can discuss that. And I thought that this would be all of a sudden a great place that we could kind of initially show what our film was going to be. So one of the reasons that Hubs, became popular, or Hubs was popular or became a thing, was this was kind of before Zoom was really popular. It more closely replicates being in the same space. So you have that, with the Zoom, you're basically just looking at a flat screen, whereas Hubs, you're in a physical space, which is more advantageous, or kind of gets that feeling of being in a conference and having those casual interactions with people, running into them essentially. You can personalize your avatars, so you could either have, you know, a robot, or you could have, you know, a little kid, or you could have an avatar that looks like you, if you wanted to. Hubs is extremely accessible with PC, Mac, tablets, phones, and also VR. So if you put a VR headset on, you'll also get hands, and so you can kind of move around and point, and also get a much more natural experience with that. It's free to use, so if you wanted to use this in your own work and present your own work, they make it open and available, and also available for download, that you can get into the code and start creating your own versions of Hubs. It's easy to set up, and it can be more immersive when you're using VR. So if you do have the headset on, you know, all of a sudden you're transported to this virtual space. And when we were presenting our film at this conference, one of the attendees sat down, and I said, "Did you just sit down?" You know, you can't really see their chair, but you could tell from their position that they were now sitting down, which is, I thought, pretty neat for the first time. The more people that use it, the less awkward it will be, so it'll become more of a familiar thing. So I see that happening in the near future. Your environments can be anything. So especially with photogrammetry, if there's a photogrammetry of, like, say, an architectural dig, you can bring people all over the world to this architectural dig, not disturb anything that's going around, because it's a virtual world, but you can transport yourself in there. And there's a one of the worlds that you can use. There's one that somebody did a photogrammetry of, and it's pretty impressive. So, yep.
Sorry to interrupt. Could
Sure.
you try resharing your screen? I think there's some parts missing. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Let me try it again.
I thought it was part of the slide design.
No, sorry, is that sharing?
Yeah, it's still there. Maybe one more time, and if not, we can continue as it is.
What is it
there's
doing?
like a black box on the right side, and
Oh, okay.
another black box at the top.
Gotcha. I think it's the window here. It's probably that. Is that gone? Is that better?
It's not up yet. Okay, now it's better. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it ended up being the videos of everybody. Okay, so sorry about that. So creating the Hubs room, it's really pretty easy. All you do is you have to use a program, and this is all web-based. You go to a program at Spoke by Mozilla, and in there you create a new you can either create a new project, or you can use one that's already been created. And they have a list, and the list is growing every day the more that people use it. But if you create a new room, they call it an empty room, but you actually have mountains and lights and things in there. You could fill the space with pre-made objects. So they have floors, and it says on the left here, there's architectural kit. There's floors and windows and doors and things that you can add in there, and you can add images and links and 3D objects and pretty much anything that you want. But we had already made this 3D VR film, and we already had 3D assets. So I was able to take those 3D assets that we already had, and to get them into Spoke, you have to convert them to a GLB format. So essentially, I found a website to how to export out, because Maya doesn't export out as GLB. I have since found out that Blender works really well. So if you pull it into Blender, you can export directly out as a GLB format. So Just be aware of that. If you are using the Maya route and you have like an OBJ with some pictures, you can grab the either GLTF or the OBJ and then drop it onto this website, and it will pack that into a GLB file. And that GLB file is then what you upload to Spoke. So this is the room that I created for that IEEE website, and you can see that it's populated now with all of the stuff that we used in our film. But we've also were able to add things like images for our process, like how the film was made and different things. Those images are hosted on our Google Drive, and it's just a link into the project. So I was able to create a space where we show some of the things that we used, showing the 2D process over here of how it started, and then how it kind of evolved into a 3D process. We have arches in here and shows the kind of underlying geometry in that. And then you can also play a web page in there, or a film of basically a walkthrough of our film, and you can play that in the space. And I was also able to create this stairway here that goes up to our the VR space, essentially. So what that does is when you walk into that sphere, it puts you inside the space of what our environment, our 3D virtual environment was like. So you get a sense of scale, and especially if you have the headset on, you can get a good idea, a better idea of how that's going. Here is MJ talking to a group of people that were interested in the film and the film process, and that went well. One of the latest things within the past week has been that we found out how to get ASL interpreters and people who need the interpreters into hubs, so making it more accessible. And the route that we did for that is that everybody who needs the interpreter or is an interpreter meets in a Zoom room, and then also in hubs. And then the interpreter shares their Zoom screen in hubs, and that's what this window is over here. And then the participants are able to pin that Zoom window down at the bottom. So then the interpreter and the person who needs the interpreter can walk around together, and more like being in a physical conference. Yeah, that's just adding more things. And just some things to consider is that if you're on a Mac, you have to enable Zoom sharing and sharing for Firefox and Chrome. So if it's not working, if you're trying this out, you need to enable that in your settings. A couple problems that we found is that you can't minimize or full screen the Zoom meeting. So if you do that, that ends up messing things up. And the window could be deleted by other participants in the room. So that has become a problem sometimes. So just be aware of that. And that is our short demonstration and process of how we are able to get our VR film out there and be able to talk about it. One last thing that I would like to say is that this presentation, I hope, will show you that that you can create a space that you can put your stuff in, whether you are a photographer or if you're a 3D modeler or anything that you want to present, you can actually present it in this physical 3D space and have it be a little bit more interactive than just posting on a website. So thank you very much. And if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mary and Mark. That was really great work. And yeah, I think it will be really useful for us as we move along in this time. So yeah, there seems to be one question, Mark.
Sure.
Any idea about optimizing photogrammetry for hubs?
Well, it is online, and it is you know, you have to keep kind of like a gaming a gaming mindset, so getting it as low as possible, you know, using normal maps and things like that. But Hubs is able to take all of that kind of that data if you use normal maps and get those in. Being able to reduce it, I personally end up using ZBrush for that, and using the decimation master in ZBrush. But I know that Blender has a pretty, I believe now has a pretty good decimation, and also I think Maya 2020 now has a fairly decent decimation kind of algorithm. So, but I haven't personally tested those out. I do know that ZBrush works really well for bringing sizes down. Also, when you upload your stuff to Hubs, before you publish to Hubs and essentially make it a room, you can, it will tell you like if your textures are too high, or if your polygon count is too high, or it'll give you a warning so that you can go back in and make those changes if you need to. I'll also add that Hubs does have a generally a 25 room capacity. So once you start getting more than that, you might run into user issues where you might start glitching. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I think there's a request for the link as well about the, yeah.
Oh, yep. I can put that in the chat here for yep, there we go. Yep. And there you go. And that's the that is our link that you can check out our personal hub.
Thank you. I also have a question about, like, did you have any feedback from those who might have viewed your content, well, the content that you created in Mozilla Hubs?
Yeah, I'll pass that over to MJ.
Well, I was really surprised because it ended up, this presentation of our work ended up possibly being more effective than if we had been just at a festival, because we could get in there and really show everything and then essentially walk into the film. And so we received fantastic feedback from some people. Do you remember Michaela's last name, Mark? I don't know. Michaela, somebody in Australia, she runs a, I don't exactly know, maybe it's a production company, but it's sort of, they deal a lot more in virtual events, I think. And she was so impressed with just the organization, how the information could be presented, that she actually built one based on Mark's, and then invited us to provide feedback on kind of how her space was working. So it was really, again, it was all happening so quickly. But then people were really engaged with how the process worked, and were like, hey, I want to do this. So it was really, it kind of took off quickly. And yeah, I would say that our presentation, we wouldn't have been able to do it if we were in the same way if we were in person.
And the other nice thing was, I found out about it, you know, like one of the days, and by the next day I essentially had it up and running. So since we had the assets, it was pretty quick. And like I said, there's a lot of other things. You can also, they have links to other things, like there's Google Pixel and also Sketchfab that you can pull in models to fill out your space. So
I think for any animator, you know, we spend a lot of time making our films, and I think there's something to this idea of being able to show off the film without watching the film. So then you can, like Mark is saying, you've got all your assets, you can put them in a space, people can walk around them almost like it's kind of a museum of artifacts. And I think that it's a great way to present, especially for 3D assets, and 2D assets can be hung on a wall like a gallery. So it really can, for artwork presentation and just the work that goes into a film, I think it was a really great find.
Definitely. I think it could be also like interactive in the future. You could have like so many things happening with these kinds of like being able to do these sorts of things.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can also get some animation. So if you have animation on your objects or whatever, that can also play while you're in the space there. So.
Yeah, so there seems to be another one, if you can quickly answer another question here. What do you hope to do next in Hubs with what you learned from this project?
Well, as of late, the interpreter services, I think has really piqued my interest, and helping to try and make that a bit more accessible and much more easy and less kind of complicated to get people together and be able to walk around easily. So I've been in the Hubs room trying to put people together and get them to understand to pin the Zoom window to the bottom, and I think if I can work with Mozilla and get them to start looking at that at least as a built-in feature, I think that would really help. So I think as far as Hubs go, I think that's what I'm probably going to start focusing on next, is how to make that a bit more accessible to more people.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark and Mary. So yeah, that was really great work. And yeah, so next up we have Into the Unknown, digital theater and boldly going forward with SOMNIUM. Presented by Andy Head from Rochester Institute of Technology and Omen Sade from Dramatic Space in New York City. So yeah, take it away.
All right, thank you, Roshan. And thank you everyone for being here for our talk. We realize that this is the final talk of the final session of the symposium. So we do appreciate your presence. And we hope that several people out there were able to stop by yesterday for our SOMNIUM demo. But don't worry if not, because after this, we will be meeting in Hubs and we will have our video playthroughs available so you can see in action some of what we'll be discussing here. So I am Andy Head, and I am an assistant professor here at RIT, and I teach theater arts for both RIT and NTID in the performing arts programs. My background is in acting and in directing, and for SOMNIUM, I served as the production manager. Omen?
So I'm Omen Sade. I had the pleasure of conceiving and writing and directing SOMNIUM. And my background is in physical theater, so telling stories with action, with the body. And I've worked as an actor and director and writer on a number of projects.
So we do want to emphasize from the very beginning of this talk that we are theater people. We come from a very traditional theater background of real live actors on a stage before a real live audience. And so in this creative process of developing and reimagining SOMNIUM, we really broke out of our comfort zone and tried to branch out and find new and different ways to create an exciting and possibly new form of theater. I also want to give you a little bit of background and context on the performing arts at RIT. And so the programs here really strive to achieve the RIT brand. And what I mean by that is working at the intersection of art and technology. And from a theater perspective, seeing how we can harness whatever certain form of cutting edge tech we're looking into and using that to push the audience's experience forward, to create something unique or perhaps different that the audience has never experienced before. And that brings us to SOMNIUM. Omen?
So SOMNIUM, which just means dream in Latin, began its life in 2016 as a Fringe festival piece at the Rochester Fringe Festival. Here are some images of it. You can see that it's 5 actors on a condensed wooden stage holding some objects. So it's done in a style called object manipulation, where the actors use objects and their bodies to create these series of dynamic images. It is as low-tech as theater can possibly be. I think that the most advanced piece of technology we had in that show was a flashlight. it capitalizes on the imaginations of the actors in terms of creating the images and the imaginations of the audience in terms of interpreting these images. And we employed this methodology of adaptation in theater, which is very common, but we wanted to choose something that was unusual for a source material. So we actually had the actors record their dreams over a couple of weeks in a dream journal. And then we used those as the source material for developing this story. And the through line that we created for a plot was a story of a group of scientists who invent a vessel which can travel into the collective dream space of humanity. And so this is how we did it. And sort of the idea with this stage is the smaller the real space, the more epic the dramatic space is. And so when Andy asked me to come and direct this show at RIT in 2020, we thought, great, we're going to do essentially a reproduction of this using a new group of actors, RIT students who can record their own dreams. So it'll be all different, but this is the format. But then, of course, COVID happened.
So much like the last presentation, we were in the middle of a creative process, and then the pandemic hit, and all theater arts across the entire world were basically halted, because what is at the heart of theater is also what's at the heart of allowing the virus to spread. So we started finding ourselves facing challenges and questioning, should SOMNIUM go forward? Should we postpone it and just delay until this is all over, whenever that may be? Should we explore SOMNIUM in a different way? At that time, we had no idea of what that might even look like. But from a traditional theater perspective, we're looking at our performance space, which could hold 50 to 60 people, now holding only 5 to 6 people. And the method in which the show would be done on a small raised platform, which previously we had 5 actors on the stage, could now only have 1 actor on the stage. And also facing the unknowns of what would happen during the fall semester. Would RIT be closed down? And if our show was planning to happen on campus, how would that derail it? So our mindset, really, we were trying to reframe things to get out in front of the virus, and how could we preserve the show no matter what the virus threw at us. And so we started looking at, okay, what are some digital theater options, and how else might this production take place? And that also brought up a question of what is at the heart of theater, which is the audience-actor relationship, and how that feeds off of each other, and the dynamic feedback between what the performers are giving and what the audience is giving. So if SOMNIUM is no longer live face-to-face, but is live online, does it lose anything? Is that necessary? Or if we took a pre-recorded route, what are some of the benefits or some of the pros and cons of that decision? And so in wrestling with all of these different challenges and questions, we did decide a very ambitious path to really take SOMNIUM in a completely different direction, which I will let Omen talk more about.
Yeah, so what we ended up doing was creating a totally digital version. We incorporated elements of game design. We brought on a couple of other very important collaborators, Elizabeth Goins and Joe Geigel, who recommended using Unreal Engine to create this game. So what you see here are some images from what ended up being a hybrid game performance story. So there were all these 3-dimensional environments, which we actually decided to put the audience in the hero role of this story. So it wasn't just that we were watching the story, you were actually a character. We endowed the audience with the character of Jesse Canis, who's an Air Force pilot and gets brought on by this group of scientists to actually pilot the ship. So you start out at the top left in your own living room, and all these objects have interactivity. And as you play through this story, there are spaces that you can explore. There are what appear to be live actors. We actually filmed them in front of a green screen, 1 by 1, for COVID safety, and then imported those video files into the Unreal Engine. And what the result is this kind of lush, colorful environment. We incorporated elements of animation. So this squid tentacle thing that you see in the middle top, that's like a cut scene in the video game where you just cut to a video of it. And so it really is this interactive process. But we kept the story of this group of scientists who voyage into dream space.
And how did we arrive there? How did we make the great leap from a small physical performance piece into a completely virtual piece? Well, one of the first things that we realized is that we did not have all of the appropriate people on the team. And so we seemingly more than doubled our production team to include experts in fields where we as traditional theater makers didn't have that knowledge or the background or the skills to create a virtual SOMNIUM. So on this current slide, you'll see above the line are some of the more traditional areas of theater design. And below the line are several areas where we realized that we had significant gaps that would need to be filled, and people who could lead those different areas of the team in order to help create this new SOMNIUM that we were envisioning. And after the show was over, we went through and we counted how many different people worked on the production, and we totaled with 72. And only 7 of them were in the cast. And typically, if you think of a giant show, you think of a lot of actors on the stage and then the people supporting them. And in this case, it was quite the opposite. There were only a handful of actors, but behind the scenes, there were so many more people who needed to come on board to help develop the show and edit the show and bring that show to realization. And Omen's going to talk a little bit more about that design process.
So because we were working with such an unusual sci-fi story and so many different elements, we decided to give a unifying aesthetic to the piece. So we decided, because it was this sci-fi story, we wanted to go with the aesthetic of the classic 1950s sci-fi. So here you have some dime store novel covers that we used as research images. You can see this ship here on the right. Ended up being a similar kind of design to the actual SOMNIUM in the story. We also wanted to kind of reference the very roots of science fiction and Jules Verne and, you know, the grandfather of science fiction. So you see this famous scene in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea where the ship is attacked by a squid. We have a reference to that, which you can see brilliantly in our Hubs room on display. We also wanted for the 3D designers to have a very clear aesthetic to go to. You know, the design of the 1950s is so iconic. And it also, of course, gives us some wonderful costumes to play with. Oh, so the other thing that we did was look at images from modern day science facilities. So these are actually images of CERN. In the story, when the Higgs boson is discovered at CERN, that rips a hole in the space-time continuum, which allows the scientists to go into this dream space. So we looked at what does CERN actually look like, and we realized it's a lot more colorful than we thought. And here are some of the wonderful costumes. We incorporated the bubble helmets, these tall boots, the blaster straps, and all this stuff that we knew that people would have fun designing and wearing, and that would present a sense of familiarity to the audience in this very kind of sometimes potentially chaotic story. So when we got into the rehearsal process, we had to do a lot of very innovative things. You can see in these pictures the green screen that we actually filmed the actors in front of. And so if there was a scene with 5 people, we would film it 5 separate times with 1 actor at a time. So what this means for the actors is, normally in a stage play, we would say, okay, go stage left and then speak to this person who's right here and then go touch this table. Okay, we didn't have any of that. So the actors, not only we had to develop a new terminology for staging based on the single camera, and the camera is also the audience, because every time the actor turns the camera, they're looking directly at you, the hero. They had to keep in mind, okay, if I'm speaking to the captain, then that person is here at 45 degrees from the camera. And then my workstation, which doesn't exist, is over here. And then over here at this angle is the porthole, which shows me outside the ship. I had to keep all of that in their minds for every single scene. And they did an amazing job of making it really seem like they were reacting to things in the space. We also did manage to have some elements of devised processes in here, but it was a lot more decentralized than what we would normally do for this process. So There were moments like with the choreography of the squid fight, we developed that. Dom, who played the guy with the spear there, he and I developed that sequence together. There were some writing sequences that we developed together. And in terms of all the digital design, all the students who worked on that had the ability to bring what they wanted into that process. Now, in a theater process, you can layer all of the elements. So you start with a bare stage, you can rehearse the actors on the bare stage, that's fine. If you can build half the set, great, use half the set. You have half the costumes, half the set, all this works. What Andy and I discovered is that in the digital sphere, in this working with Unreal, every element had to be finished before Elizabeth and Joe and Jan Carlos could actually start putting these things together. So as we kept saying, oh yeah, we almost have that, they were sort of panicking a little bit as the launch date got closer and closer, because they had to incorporate not only the 3D environments, but also the interactivity, the video components of the actors. So if there are 5 actors in a scene, that's potentially like 20 or 30 different individual clips that then had to be rearranged and edited together. There were captions that had to be synced up to those videos, interpreting videos, music and sound effects, animations, interactivity. So everything depended on everything else already being created. When we got to the point where we were going to launch, we actually decided to push it back a little bit because we needed more time. And some of the challenges that we encountered were, because we were using Unreal Engine in a way that it's not necessarily designed for, the engine was getting overloaded. We also realized that what we thought was going to be, just a little thing that you would download, ended up being 12 gigabytes, which is bigger than most people casually download. There were compatibility issues with software. It didn't work on any Macs. It also didn't really work as well on a standard PC. It worked better on like a gaming PC, which most of our intended audience didn't necessarily have access to. And all of these were discoveries for Andy and I. I kept thinking sort of like, wow, here we are. We've taken this voyage out into the unknown. But despite all of those challenges, what we discovered in the end was that if you want to go to the next slide, Andy, when the technique works, when the technique of putting this live filmed person in a 3D constructed environment, when that works, it's really spectacular. And because you have the ability to move around and see different elements, you really feel like you're there interacting with a real human being. And it's really exciting to see that come together. The other thing that was very pleasing to me was that all of the students who worked on it talked about feeling this sense of camaraderie with each other, even though they almost never physically were in the same room with each other. It was almost entirely over Zoom. So even though it was this very complex process, there was a sense of togetherness with it. And then there's the question of, has anyone never done this exactly before? We don't know. And it seems like, in theater, you are working with forms and everyone in theater always says, oh, we're doing something totally new. And almost never is that actually the case. And I really felt like, oh my gosh, we're doing something that no one has ever done, at least in this way. And I think that what was so exciting about that, it was just incorporating the work and the innovation of so many different collaborators, none of whom were in their comfort zones, because the theater people had no idea what was going on with the technology. And the digital people didn't necessarily have so much experience with how a theater process works. So
where do we go from here? Well, as Omen started to hint at, perhaps the pandemic has forced us to discover a new form of theater. Since the very beginning of theater, it's been fighting for its survival. And that's especially true in the 20th century, as new forms of entertainment such as radio and TV and movies came to be. Theater had to keep evolving and innovating and scrapping for its own little spot on the storytelling territory. And so what this form of digital theater or video game performance allows for is a completely immersive world where the audience can be in that world with the characters, which is difficult to replicate in traditional performance. It allows for the audience to be able to have autonomy on where they want to move and what they want to look at. And also it creates several different choose your own adventure options. So maybe the audience wants to choose path A or path B, and that will lead to different sort of outcomes. And so all of these things tie together into a more unique, personalized experience that that provides a different kind of audience engagement than theater has really done up to this point. So perhaps there will be a SOMNIUM 3.0 that we continue to build upon the successes of SOMNIUM 2.0. But that concludes our talk. So I'm gonna stop sharing the screen and see if we have any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Andy and Omen. So that was again like a wonderful presentation. And I think, yeah, COVID has also given us so many chances to become so creative and come up with like really innovative solutions. It also reminded me of the keynote talk as well, where like Terence was talking about how these challenges sometimes give us like, you know, make us come up with like really cool innovations. And yeah, I was just wondering, like, I think you briefly touched upon it, like what's next for SOMNIUM? Like, will you continue in this sort of VR path, or like, do you still prefer to have your original kind of presentation style, or like what is next for SOMNIUM? Yeah.
Well, when I first kind of designed SOMNIUM as a show, the thing that was so exciting for me was that it doesn't have to just have one form. You know, the methodology of working with actors to record their dreams and then adapting from that could be done if it was done in a live, you know, small stage version. That can be done 1,000 times with 1,000 different casts. And I think that this is a new and exciting way of working on it. I would love to see there be some parallel tracks going. And I'm very interested in seeing if we can create a more fully realized VR version, or even a more fully realized desktop version of SOMNIUM in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we are running out of time, and there's a link posted for the Hubs link for SOMNIUM as well in the chat. So please do check it out. And now we will move into the Hub session. So if you need interpreting services, please come into room number 1. And I guess we'll see you there. Thank you, Andy and Omen, and everyone who presented today. Thank you very much.